Greetings, YouTube users. My name is Christina, and I am here today to officially declare my gender identity, to join the ranks of the gender nonconformists. I figured it was about time I actually contributed to the YouTube genderqueer community, perhaps inadvertently help someone else out there who's questioning their gender. So let me start off by saying I never had any issues with the sex I was born into as a child. I had female genitalia, I was a girl, simple as that in my mind. What I did have issues with growing up, however, were gender expectations. My baptism, age 4, was the only time in my life I've ever worn a dress. And I've only ever worn a skirt when I had to for my high school's choir in the last few years. I don't mind it so much now if it's mandatory, that is. But when I was 4, I couldn't stand it. It just didn't feel right. I was very uncomfortable. Although that was partially due to the baptism itself, but I'll save that for another video. Anyways, I couldn't wait to get out of there. We went to a local park afterwards, and although I was a bit happier to be in a more familiar setting, I still wasn't happy to be in a dress. And from what I can remember, family members around me probably called me pretty or some other word that I wasn't too happy about either. Growing up, I remember I played with both girls' and boys' toys, dolls, even a dollhouse, little Matchbox cars, I love those, and various gender-neutral toys like a video camera and a tape recorder. I know I played quite a lot of games on my Sega Genesis growing up as well, mostly racing, sports, or fighting games. Whether that has anything to do with my gender identity, I'm not sure, to be honest. But it is very interesting to note that as a young child, I was definitely more comfortable with men than with women, generally speaking, which I've heard is uncommon. That being said, I only grew up with my dad, so perhaps that was the reason for that. I don't think I ever really focused on things as a young kid that were gender specific. One thing I know I've been very lucky for is that my dad never forced me to act like a girl or put me in dresses all the time or anything like that. I've had quite a lot of freedom that way. I mean, I still bought girls' clothes, that was fine with me, but I generally didn't wear anything too pink or frilly, for lack of a better word. Actually, there was one time as a kid that I bought a piece of boys' clothing, and that was a t-shirt with Wile E. Coyote on it. I might also note that the Spice Girls were my favorite band when I was little, and I had this sort of idea that they were like rivals with the Backstreet Boys, the opposites in their names, girls versus boys. Anyway, whatever. It is interesting to say that I identified with the Spice Girls and the idea of girl power, independence, being self-sufficient, being powerful, that sort of thing. No, I'm not a feminist. I have to say I don't really like that word. I'd prefer something like gender equality. I will fight for that. But I will say that I've always liked to think a woman can do anything a man can do. Another reason I enjoy defying gender expectations. Not that it's purely for that purpose, because really I'm just trying to be myself. But anyway, for the most part, gender wasn't a huge issue for me until I hit puberty. In that I was generally pretty content being a girl. It wasn't even really an issue in school until puberty. I was still generally more comfortable hanging out with girls, they were my best friends, but somewhere in the first couple years of puberty that started to change. I started to realize I was a tomboy, a bit different from the other girls. This was never something I noticed before, nor was it an issue at all. But in fact, with a few of my female classmates who wanted to hang out with me, I started to sort of warn them that I was a tomboy, that I was different. And nearing the end of grade 5, we had a few classes called Family Life as part of a religion this year, in which we basically studied what changes we go through during puberty. And I've always had a fascination with things that are taboo or risque, so this was no exception, especially beginning to learn about the opposite sex, but not in a sexual way. Oh, no, no. No, I actually started to be jealous of some of the changes they got. No kidding. Wider shoulders, more muscle. How come I couldn't get this? No, instead, I get to have wider hips, and somehow my stomach was supposed to come inward, which I thought was seriously weird. As if I didn't have enough to deal with breasts and a period. Ick. I can't say I was super proud of hitting womanhood when that happened, even though somehow my dad was happy and proud of that. And I was resistant to start wearing bras, too. That wasn't fun. One more step to me becoming a woman was one step too much. Of course, I did eventually, but it took a couple of years to get up the nerve to. I think when I first started buying them, I felt pretty embarrassed by it. but perhaps that's normal. I wouldn't know. I was also quite uncomfortable with the new hips I was growing. I think I didn't quite realize what exactly was going to happen to me until it finally did, and it was weird. I swear it makes even walking kinda awkward. So I was definitely not happy with my new, more feminine body, and then, just before grade 8, a new phase of my life. I decided to start wearing boys' clothes. I can't say I was fully comfortable browsing through boys' clothing, but I had had enough with girls' clothes. I think as I grew older, they started to look more and more feminine. But maybe that was an illusion, I'm not sure. Maybe it was an attempt to combat my feminizing bone structure. I decided to get boys' clothes in an attempt to look better. Fashion was never my forte. I thought this might help, which is a ridiculous thing, come to think of it, as if defying gender norms even more would make me more popular. Ha! But I guess I couldn't stand the thought of looking feminine. A couple people were happy that I finally got new clothing after a couple years. It was at this point as well that I started to wonder why it seemed as if I couldn't hang out with the guys. The girls in my class had their own little cliques, and there was sometimes drama going on between them, which I thought was completely unnecessary, but the guys seemed like a pretty cohesive unit, that they could all get along quite well. I kinda wished I was one of the guys, and I wished this more and more as time went on during grade 8 and 9. But, seeing as I'm not a very sociable person to begin with, that never really happened, unfortunately. But I tried. Oh, I suppose I should touch on the type of people I've been attracted to over the years. Throughout elementary, junior high, and even a couple times in grade 10, I was usually attracted to guys. However, that being said, there were quite a few times I was attracted to women throughout those years that I didn't even realize. In fact, a couple times, I thought to myself that I just really, really wanted to be a certain girl's friend, that I couldn't possibly be a lesbian. That would be impossible, I thought. I had never known being gay to be a good thing, so I averted that as much as possible. It wasn't until the summer between grade 8 and 9 that I finally admitted to myself that I was bisexual, after watching Shakira's music video for Don't Bother. Then I came out as bi in early grade 10. I was attracted to a whole slew of girls throughout high school, and still a couple guys, but that was rare. Nowadays, I'd say my orientation would be about a 5 on the Kinsey scale. Anyways, back to gender. Again, wasn't really my focus throughout high school until I started to learn about trans people and the term genderqueer and androgyny in general. So I think the best way to define my gender is to say that it's androgynous. I didn't really like the term genderqueer at first, seeing as I didn't fully identify with the word queer, but I've come to like it more and more nowadays. The reason I think that I didn't really like the term queer is because I figured that it locked me into the LGBT community, when, yes, technically I am a part of it, but I like to think of myself as neutral, as someone who can slip into the heteronormative community as well. I mean, I can, generally, I think. Although there have been quite a number of times in the last couple of years that people have thought I'm a guy, which I find stunning because I don't think I look like one, but some people do. I'm flattered by it, actually. I've never taken testosterone, nor do I identify as a trans man or a man, period, so I don't feel I deserve to be called a guy, though I do have quite a low voice for a female, so I can almost see how you can think I'm a guy from that. Or perhaps my large feet, but that's not really something people look at. Which, by the way, I'm curious to know how I've gotten characteristics like that. Such a low voice, I was a tenor in my high school's choir, or my large feet. I usually wear about 9, give or take, depending on the shoe and men's sizes. Or having a happy trail, or other things I've noticed. Could be genetics, perhaps, as my testosterone levels are not above average. In fact, I had them tested recently for an unrelated reason, and they were on the low end of normal, of all things. But anyways, I love to be neutral in things like this, gender or sexual orientation, or just in general, really. I don't see myself transitioning anytime soon, as I still have my roots in identifying as a female, but who knows. I sure would love to have a bit more of a masculine body. So I think I will try increasing my levels of testosterone through my diet. There are ways to do that, and I've read about them, so I should start that soon. Not to mention exercising more, of course. Especially strength training. Adding muscle, I think, increases your levels of testosterone, so that should be helpful. But anyways, I would say nowadays that I identify as genderqueer. My gender identity fluctuates. Sometimes I feel quite masculine, other times I feel a bit feminine. Generally, it's a bit more on the masculine end of the spectrum, at least in the way I dress and act and so forth, even though, like I said, I still have my roots as a female. I would also like to think that I have a more masculine mind, or at the very least, I did when I was a bit younger, excelling in math and science over English, generally speaking. The BBC's sex ID test said my mind was slightly on the masculine side. I think that's what I am most interested in nowadays, is psychological differences between the sexes. If there's any, and if so, what are they? But I'm sure I'm boring you by now. If you've listened to this whole thing, I applaud you for having the patience to sit through it. If you'd like to know anything more, as I'm sure there's probably stuff I've missed, don't hesitate to ask me a question. See ya!